Hey there besties! Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're continuing our recap of the manhwa, Kill the Villainess. If you're new to this series, check the description below for links to previous episodes. Lastly, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy the video. It really helps our channel grow. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Hubris stood, his expression clouded with confusion. "Why are you dressed like that?" he asked, his tone serious. "Are you more curious about my attire than my reason for coming to see you?" Eris replied. She settled into a seat with a sigh. "My legs hurt, so I'll sit here for a while. Even though we'll be getting off soon." "What do you mean by we?" Hubris asked, frowning. "Aren't you on your way to meet Father Matthias?" "Take me with you," Eris said, her gaze unwavering. Hubris hesitated, then responded, I see." His calm demeanor betrayed no suspicion, though Eris had orchestrated his presence on the Magitrain. She had instructed Anakin to ensure a young girl delivered a message to him, urging him to visit Father Matthias urgently. "Were you not heading to the Randol province, Lady Mazzelian?" Hubris asked. "Officially, yes. But that's why I'm asking you to help me get there," Eris replied with a soft smile. "So, the disguise is to slip off the train unnoticed," he pressed. "Exactly. And you're the perfect person to help me," she said with a light laugh. "What do you mean?" he asked, but Eris offered no answer. The train conductor's voice rang out, announcing their imminent arrival at Benitio. As the train slowed, Eris turned to Hubris. "I'd like for you to play the part of a shameless priest infatuated with women." Hubris blinked in shock, but before he could protest, she had taken his arm. Together, they stepped off the train, drawing murmurs from onlookers. "Isn't that the high priest? Just who is that woman with him?" "How scandalous," someone whispered. Unfazed by the gossip, Eris clung to Hubris' arm, smiling serenely. The corners of Hubris' lips tightened as they walked through the bustling streets. He didn't need to speak for Eris to know how much the situation troubled him. As their carriage rattled along, he finally turned to her, as though he had something to say. "Do you have a question?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Hubris quickly looked away. "It's nothing. If you do, speak freely," she said, glancing at him briefly. "Don't worry about Anakin. He's trustworthy." Hubris shifted uneasily before saying, "Your soul. It seems much more stable since we last met. You can see that?" Eris asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," he said softly. "It seems you've come to terms with this life. Let's just call it a time of preparation before I disappear completely," she replied, her voice even. "Lady Mazzelian, please don't speak like that," Hubris said, his tension evident. "Why not? Is it because you think this life is a gift from God?" She chuckled, her tone sharp. "Don't repeat yourself, High Priest. In truth, you don't care whether I live or die, do you?" Hubris' expression faltered, but he said nothing. Eris's thoughts drifted. In the novel's original narrative, Hubris had been revealed as her hidden older half-brother. Though Eris had leaned on him, he ultimately betrayed her, abandoning her at her lowest to save another. "There's still time before my end comes," she said, breaking the silence. "People say everyone meets an end that suits them, don't they? Mine will be no different." Her voice carried a quiet resolve. If this world was indeed a grand stage, what melody would accompany her exit? The thought lingered as she gazed out the window, her expression unreadable. They soon arrived at Father Matthias's modest cottage. The elderly man opened the door, his face lighting up in surprise. "Hubris? What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in the capital?" His gaze flicked to Eris, his expression perplexed. "I'm glad to see you in good health, Father," Hubris said, bowing politely. "Hello, Father Matthias. I apologize for arriving unannounced," Eris said smoothly. "But there is something I'd like to ask of you." Matthias's brows furrowed as he took in her presence. "Wait, his voice trailed off. "You may call me Lady Eris or refer to me as an outsider. Either is fine," she said. Her calm demeanor masked the tension she felt. "Since this man can see my soul as well, there's no point in pretending." "Please, come in," Matthias said after a moment's pause. "It seems this conversation might take some time." Eris followed him inside, glancing around. For a former high priest, his furnishings are quite simple, she thought, noting the sparse room. Soon, Matthias returned with tea and gestured for them to sit. Hubris' voice broke the silence. Were you the one who sent the child with that message to me? He asked Eris. Eris smiled faintly, setting down her teacup. Did you just realize it now, Hubris? I thought you figured it out on the train. Hubris' expression darkened. How can you be so casual about luring someone with lies? I acted because I feared someone might set a trap to harm you, Eris said coolly. You trust others too easily. I have faith that God will guide me on the right path, Hubris replied firmly. He's upset because I used his father figure, Matthias, to deceive him, Eris thought, observing his rigid posture. Who would guess that this holy man is the illegitimate son of Marquis Mazzillion? No one would ever imagine the dancer who bore the Marquis's child would entrust the baby to the cathedral. Matthias cleared his throat, drawing their attention. So, Miss Outsider, may I ask what brings you all the way here? I'm afraid this old man may not be of much help. Eris's eyes narrowed slightly. This is a question only you can answer. She recalled Jason's tale of slaying the dragon and the revelation he had shared. The dragon had claimed the prophecy was not divine but its own manipulation, designed to orchestrate its death. If that's true, then the prophecy twisted the lives of many, including Jason's, into mere tools. I need to know exactly what Father Matthias heard. Her gaze turned sharp as she asked. Sir Kagar stated that the dragon broke the law of causality and fabricated the prophecy, twisting fate. Did you truly not realize that the voice of the prophecy you heard was not from God? Matthias's hand trembled slightly as he gripped his teacup. I did not, he admitted. It was only after some time had passed that I began to sense something was wrong. I was bewildered. Do you remember the exact contents of the prophecy? Eris pressed. Matthias nodded solemnly. Of course. How could I forget? Even now, the words remain etched in my mind. The child born on the 9th night, when the 3rd moon wanes, must slay the dragon that has gone mad. Only that child can end the dragon's madness. On the day the crazed dragon draws its last breath, all will return to its rightful place. Eris's expression remained calm, though her mind raced. To its place? What does that mean? Eris asked, her tone measured yet probing. I do not know, Father Matthias admitted, his voice heavy with regret. What that place might be is beyond me. Compared to the truth, I am an existence too small and foolish. Were there perhaps any other prophecies? She asked, her gaze steady. Other prophecies? No, he replied firmly. There was nothing like that. In the first place, God does not hand down prophecies. The oracle I claimed to have received was unique. That's why I was exalted, becoming high priest and earning the highest honor. But when I discovered that what I had heard was not divine but words of a dragon, I could not bring myself to confess the truth. He lowered his head, his voice breaking. I didn't want to give up the prestige and glory that came with my position. Even after ruining a person's life, I couldn't reveal the truth in the end. I was a coward. His hands covered his face as quiet sobs shook his shoulders. Father, Hubris said softly, reaching out to console him. Eris, however, remained impassive, watching the broken man before her. I need to think, she mused. Jason's fate as a dragon slayer was predetermined by the author, who acts as this world's god. Could that predetermined fate be what the dragon referred to as its place? But then, what did the dragon change by fabricating its so-called prophecy? Did anything actually change? Could the dragon have lied to Jason? Her thoughts raced. No, that doesn't fit. What if the dragon Jason killed wasn't the mad dragon but another dragon entirely? In the novel, there was only one line. The warrior Jason slew the dragon. It never specified that it was the mad dragon. So why would the dragon go to such lengths to drag Jason into this fabricated prophecy? The answer struck her like a flash of lightning. By any chance, she asked aloud, her voice sharp, can dragons not end their own lives? Father Matthias looked up, startled by the question. What a strange thing to ask. Have you ever seen nature end its own life? A dragon is the greatest creature God ever created. They are no less than nature itself. Dragons prosper as time passes. But even they, at some point, reach the end of their lifespan. I see, Eris murmured, her expression tightening. However, Matthias continued, his tone softening, such a lifespan is beyond human comprehension. How could man, who is like a microbe to them, ever hope to fathom such a length of time? It is like a mayfly attempting to understand the life of a human. Just as I thought, Eris realized, clenching her fists as nausea welled up in her chest. The dragon couldn't die on its own. It needed someone to end its life, Just like me. Just then, Eris clutched her mouth, feeling the wave of nausea rise. She bolted from the room, running toward the nearby bush. Leaning against a tree, she retched, her body trembling as she tried to calm herself. Looking up, she noticed Anakin approaching, his expression unreadable as he extended a handkerchief. She accepted it quietly, wiping her mouth. "Did you bring the mirror?" she asked, her voice faint but steady. "I did. Should I show it to you now?" he replied. "Yes, but let's go further into the forest first," she said, regaining her composure as she led the way. The night enveloped them as they ventured deeper into the woods, Anakin lighting their path with a lantern. They stopped near a serene lake, its stillness amplifying the tension in the air. "This should be safe enough," Eris said, glancing around before producing the mirror. "Media, I have questions that need answering. Show yourself." The surface of the mirror shimmered as Media's image appeared, her expression curious. "What's the matter for you to call on me so urgently?" she asked. Eris wasted no time. "Did the mad dragon interfere with the prophecy to manipulate Jason into killing it?" she demanded. Media smiled faintly. "You never fail to surprise me." Yes, Jason's fate was to kill a dragon, but the prophecy never specified which dragon. Eris's expression darkened. "So, the mad dragon wasn't the one he was destined to kill?" Media's tone grew serious. "Correct. That dragon was an outsider, just like you." Eris's eyes widened as Media continued, her voice tinged with both intrigue and melancholy. The outsider was reincarnated as a dragon and, at first, found joy in its new existence. It was the greatest creature, unchallenged in power and revered by humans. It even helped build kingdoms, fell deeply in love with another dragon, and raised an egg. But eternity wears on even the strongest minds. Happiness gave way to boredom, and boredom led to torment. Eventually, the outsider-turned-dragon descended into madness. Desperate, it sought the witches for help. Circe, the second eldest witch, offered a deal. "I cannot kill you with my own hands," Circe told the dragon, "but if I were to tell you how to die, what would you give me in return?" The dragon agreed without hesitation, paying Circe's price. Circe then revealed the way. "Soon, a warrior will be born with the fate to kill a dragon. Steal that fate, and your wish will be granted." And so, the mad dragon took its lover's death, Jason's destined kill, and manipulated the prophecy to end its own life. But when Jason slew the mad dragon, the balance was disrupted. A dragon was left alive, its lover taken, and its rightful death stolen. Overcome with despair, the surviving dragon sought to reclaim its fate. Eris listened, her fists clenched as Media went on. To break the law of causality, the dragon sacrificed its own heart. It was then, at that pivotal moment, that two women made the same wish. Some would call it a miracle, others a tragic misfortune. Perhaps it was both. Media's words hung in the air, their weight pressing heavily on Eris. The stillness of the lake mirrored the storm brewing within her. The woman prayed for the wish of the girl she embraced to come true. But the girl's wish was for herself to vanish from this world. The dragon granted both wishes. The girl's soul disappeared along with the dragon's heart, and in that instant, the world's law of causality sought to fill the void. It found a new soul, your soul, and placed it in the empty vessel left behind. "That just happened to be you," Media said. "Why me? Answer me," Eris shouted, her voice trembling with anguish. "Why was I chosen? I'm sure there were plenty of people who wished for something like this to happen to them. So why me? Why?" Tears streamed down her face as her hands trembled uncontrollably. In a sudden fit of anger, she hurled the mirror into the lake. Her head throbbed painfully as she clutched it, her vision blurred by tears. The rustling of leaves snapped her back to reality. Turning quickly, she saw Hubris kneeling, restrained by Anakin, who held a sword close to the priest's neck. "He was eavesdropping on your conversation," Anakin informed her calmly. "What would you have me do? Should I silence him forever?" Hubris remained quiet, his gaze somber. "You were in contact with a witch. Do you realize how grave a crime that is?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "It may be a grave crime in your country," Eris replied, her tone cold and detached, "but I'm an outsider. What does it matter to me? As long as you are in Lady Mazelian's body, it is still a crime," he protested. "So?" she countered, her voice calm but cutting. "What do you mean, so?" Hubris asked, his eyes locked on hers. "Are you going to report me to the holy place?" "Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted, she said, her voice laced with defiance. Even if this body cannot die by a sword, who knows what will happen if I'm burned at the stake? Go on. Report me. Lady Eris. He exclaimed, his voice conflicted. Anakin, release him, Eris ordered. He won't be able to report me if you keep holding him like that. Anakin hesitated but eventually sheathed his sword. As he stepped back, Eris quickly grabbed the weapon, unsheathing it once more. Dropping the blade before Hubris, she said, on second thought, save yourself the trouble. As a high priest, you have the authority to pass judgment on the spot. Go ahead. Kill me with this sword. Isn't contact with witches punishable by death? Aren't they all considered witches themselves? Eris's mind flashed back to the original story. In the novel, Hubris had wielded that authority like a weapon to threaten Eris. He had called her dirty blood, even knowing she wasn't a witch and that she was his sister. But now, she saw something different in his eyes. Pity. Genuine pity, because this was before she became the villainess who tormented his beloved Helena. What a shallow man, she thought bitterly, watching as Hubris lowered his head. Priest, she called, her voice quieter now, as she crouched before him. If you're not going to strike my neck, then all you need to do is pretend to know nothing. Ignore the fact that I'm an outsider. Ignore my contact with a witch. Lady Mazzillion, he whispered, his voice wavering. I'll die soon anyway, Eris said, her tone steady but resigned. But I promise you this, I won't die in front of you. Why are you talking like that? It's not because I'm afraid of those things. Hubris exclaimed, his voice raw. I feel bitter because of your sadness. What can I do? I want to beg for forgiveness from your anger. So please, just don't die. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Eris reached out and brushed the tear away with her finger. Don't feel sorry for me. It's annoying, she said coldly, her tone cutting through the air. Anakin stepped forward, lifting his sword before striking Hubris on the back of his head with the hilt. The priest collapsed, unconscious, in an instant. Dump him in front of the cottage. We'll briefly stop by Randall on our way to the capital, Eris instructed, her voice steady. Are you finished with everything in Benitio? Anakin asked. I've heard everything I needed. Let's leave before we raise further suspicion, she replied. I'll grab a carriage. Will you wait here? He asked. Yes, she said simply. I'll be back as soon as possible, he promised, hoisting Hubris over his shoulder and disappearing into the forest. Left alone, Eris walked to the edge of the lake, sitting on the ground and dipping her feet into the cool water. As the moonlight reflected off the rippling surface, her thoughts spiraled. Even though I need to remember how the novel developed to plan for future events, I don't want to do anything. It's all meaningless anyway. I'll continue to live as a puppet in place of Eris and die on the date dictated by the law of causality. She leaned back against the grass, her eyes heavy. At least in my original life, when I tried hard enough, some things changed. If it was going to be like this, I should have done nothing. A faint rustling in the forest brought her back to the present. Looking up, she saw Anakin emerging from the shadows. You're quick, she remarked, her voice flat. I was worried, he admitted as he approached her. You were worried about me? Why? She asked, her tone carrying a trace of disbelief. I was worried you'd leave me and go somewhere, he said, kneeling beside her. You were worried I might have died? She pressed, her eyes narrowing slightly. Anakin hesitated for a moment before replying, his voice softer now. I'm curious about you, Master. What? Eris asked, sitting up straighter. I'm curious about how you've lived until now, and about the kind of life you wish to live. Please, forgive me for my curiosity, he said earnestly. That's why I was afraid. I feared I wouldn't get a chance to know the real you. Eris observed Anakin closely, her thoughts distant. This man falls for Eris Mazzillion in the story. It would have been nice if I'd been able to read about him in the novel, like the other male leads, she mused. Her voice broke the silence. Come here. Carry me. I don't want to walk, she said, reaching for his shoulder. Without hesitation, he picked her up and began walking out of the forest. Eris rested her head against him, her mind lingering on his steady heartbeat. His heartbeat doesn't belong to someone in love. This is just an act of kindness, detached from romance. But it's soothing all the same, she thought, her eyelids growing heavy until she drifted off to sleep. In the carriage, they sat across from each other. Eris began to speak, her gaze distant. The world I came from was far more advanced than this empire. Freedom of religion was a given. We didn't have magical engineering, but we had something called science. And there was no caste system, no kings or aristocrats. Instead, the people elected a leader every 5 years. Anakin listened intently. If there's no caste system, how do you distinguish someone's class? He asked. Much like here, it correlated with wealth. The rich held more power and influence, she explained. Unlike Eris Miserian, I was poor, just an average person in that world. Did you have a family? He asked. Yes. There were 4 of us, my parents, my younger brother, and me. I was sick of them at the time. But looking back now, we were a happy family. For the most part, she replied, her voice softening as she looked out the window. May I ask why you didn't like your family? He pressed gently. I thought my parents favored my brother. Actually, they did. I used to blame myself, thinking I wasn't loved because I was a bad child, she admitted. Poverty forced me to grow up faster than other kids. Maybe I acted mature just to earn their praise. But the more responsible I became, the more they expected it from me. She sighed. You know, Anakin, no child enjoys being treated differently. I'll never forgive my parents for that. But I can still miss them. I want to get back what I lost, and if I ever see them again, I want to confront them about how they treated me. I see, Anakin said quietly, his tone neutral yet attentive. When they arrived at the inn, the innkeeper beamed. Oh, newlyweds. Let me show you to our best room. Eris opened her mouth to correct the assumption, but Anakin interrupted. Please give her the best room. It doesn't matter what room you give me, he said with finality. In her room, Eris took a bath and felt the fatigue of travel melt away. I'm exhausted from the carriage ride, she thought, drying her hair as she sat on the bed. But Anakin seemed perfectly fine. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. Come in, she called. A young girl stepped in. Would you like me to clean your bathwater? Sure, Eris replied. Then, out of curiosity, she asked, Hey, it's my first time in Randall. Can you recommend places to visit? The girl's face lit up. Of course. Randall is famous for its lake. It's deeper and more beautiful than the sea. Our in lends boats if you're interested. And there's a night market happening right now. The sights are incredible. A night market? Eris echoed, her interest piqued. Meanwhile, back at Father Match's cottage, Hubris stirred awake. Hubris, are you awake? I found you on the doorstep and brought you in. What happened? The priest asked. Hubris' mind drifted to Eris's sharp words. Are you going to report me to the Holy Palace? Great. That's exactly what I want you to do. A bitter smile touched his lips as he rubbed the back of his neck. Why is it that the women I want to hold on to most are the ones who try to leave? His thoughts wandered to old memories. Before his birth, Hubris' mother had been a young, promising dancer. She'd even changed her religion and endured countless hardships to have him. In the end, she lost everything she once had. The weight of those memories pressed against his chest as he sat in silence. When Hubris was a child, curiosity once led him to ask his mother a question that shattered the fragile peace in their home. She slammed her plate down, the sound of breaking porcelain echoing through the room. Didn't I tell you never to ask about your father? She screamed, her voice trembling with rage. My life wouldn't have been ruined like this if it weren't for you. Because of you, I think about dying every single day. Why did you have to ruin my life? Her words cut like knives. Trembling, Hubris sank to the floor, his small hands clutching his ears. It's all my fault. I should have never been born. Everything is because of me, he thought, terror and guilt consuming him. That night, like so many others, he couldn't sleep. Awakened by a nightmare, he tiptoed into his mother's room, reaching out to touch her face, ensuring it was still warm. What if one day she really leaves me? He thought, his heart heavy with fear. The weight of his mother's unhappiness was too much for his small shoulders to bear, but he wanted to ease her burden somehow. One day, Hubris approached Father Matchis with a quiet resolve. I'll follow you, Father. I want to become a priest as well, he said, his voice steady despite his youth. Father Matchis studied the boy for a moment, then nodded. Among all the believers I've seen, you are the most faithful. If this is your decision, you may come with me. Hubris' heart wavered with both determination and apprehension. He returned home that evening, ready to tell his mother about his decision. But as he stepped into their small, dimly lit house, the sight before him froze him in his tracks. His mother lay motionless on the bed, her body lifeless. "Mother," he whispered, his voice trembling. But there was no response. The room seemed to collapse around him as he stumbled forward, his chest tightening with panic. "Mother," he shouted, his cries growing louder, desperate to wake her. But she was already gone. "The night before I was set to leave, Mother took her own life. If I had stayed with her, if I had held her hand one more time, would things have turned out differently?" He wondered, his heart breaking. At her funeral, he knelt by her side, kissing her cold hand, tears streaming down his face. Years later, Hubris found himself drawn to Eris Miserian. Her sharp words and distant gaze reminded him of the woman he had loved and lost. "If I told you that you reminded me of my mother from the moment we first met, would you believe me?" he thought, his mind replaying moments of their encounters. "Her weary soul reminded me of my mother's, always bruised, always burdened. Would she believe me if I told her I was just as desperate as she was?" Hubris wondered, recalling Eris's cold gaze when she refused his plea to stay in their world. That night, Hubris dreamt of his mother. She was crying, as always, and blaming him. "It's my fault. Because of me." He could still see the moment she stood before him, seeking God's blessing. Her tattered soul and emerald eyes, vibrant as a summer forest, had taken his breath away. Perhaps that was why he hesitated back then, he thought, wiping away a stray tear. "Lady Eris," he murmured, "do I feel this way because I want to save you?" The memory of their conversation in the carriage came to him, unbidden. Her voice rang in his mind, "There's still a lot of time left before I die, so don't worry. Everyone meets a death that suits them." The words struck him anew, mingling with his fear of failing to save her, just as he'd failed his mother. "So I prayed to God," he thought bitterly. "I prayed to hold on to her." But even in his desperation, he had whispered the night before, "Tell me what you want me to do. Let me seek forgiveness. Please don't be angry. Please, don't die." Eris's reply had been chilling, "Don't feel sorry for me. That really gets on my nerves." Once again, my prayer failed to reach God, he said inwardly. Meanwhile, in Randall, Eris wandered the bustling night market with Anakin. The warm hum of the crowd enveloped them as lanterns cast soft light over the lively streets. "It's more crowded than I expected," Eris remarked. "Aren't you hungry?" "I'm fine," Anakin replied, his gaze scanning the crowd with practiced caution. "You're always on edge in crowds, but we're here to relax." "It's okay to loosen up a little," Eris said with a small smile. "Understood," he nodded. Taking his hand, she led him through the market. "Let's find something to eat. I'm starving." They soon arrived at a food stall where a grill sizzled with aromatic sausages. "How much for one?" Eris asked the vendor. "Only 3 ekram per sausage. We've got original, cheese, and spiced varieties," the seller exclaimed, grinning. Eris pondered. Anakin, which one do you want?" Before he could answer, the vendor chuckled. "Oh my, what a fine young man. Are you two married? You look like newlyweds, awkward but adorable." Anakin opened his mouth to protest, but Eris cut in smoothly. "Yes, we're on our honeymoon." He's usually friendly but gets shy around strangers. Anakin said nothing, observing her calm demeanor as the vendor beamed. "Well, aren't you lucky, young man? A pretty wife like her. How about a discount? 2 sausages for 5 ekram. "We'll take 1 original and 1 spiced," Eris said, smiling. As they walked on, Eris ate her sausage with relish. "The spiced one tastes like red pepper. It reminds me of home. Ah, it's so good. If only I had some beer," she mused aloud. Anakin watched her, his expression softening. "It's my first time seeing you enjoy food like this, Master." Eris paused, tilting her head. "Really? You look happy too," he observed. Nearby, a vendor called out, "Special grain liquor from Randall. Delicious and unique." Eris's eyes sparkled mischievously. "Do you know what would make this night even better?" she asked Anakin. "What?" he asked, wary. "Alcohol," she said, grinning. A crowd began gathering near a small stage as a man called out, "All right. Gather round, everyone. The show is about to start." Anakin returned to Eris, holding 2 cups. "Master, here's the grain liquor you wanted. Let's drink together." Eris accepted the drink, her gaze shifting to the stage. "Thank you. It looks like something's happening here." She took a sip, savoring the taste. It seems to be a play, Anakin observed, watching the performers prepare. On stage, the presenter stepped forward, his voice carrying above the murmurs of the crowd. Today's story is one of heartbreak and tragedy, a tale of a father misled by treachery. Consumed by suspicion, he accuses his wife and son of betrayal. In his folly, he kills his own son. Ah, how blind he was. The presenter paused, letting the words sink in before continuing dramatically. A wicked witch offers him the chance to turn back time. But to accept her help would mean committing treason against the crown. And so, he faces the guillotine for his crime. A tragic tale of guilt, betrayal, and regret. Eris smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with quiet amusement. I see. A story about the imperial family, she murmured, tilting her cup to her lips. Her smile lingered as the presenter's impassioned voice faded into the night. Oh, the poor prince, she thought, the irony of the tale lighting her features with subtle intrigue. The stage dimmed, leaving only a single beam of light illuminating a man standing with his back to the audience. The first act began as his voice resonated through the silence. How heartless, he declared, his tone laced with bitterness. I lived my life in service to what I believed was right, faithfully dedicating myself to this nation. Yet, I am cast aside so easily. I do not fear death, but the wicked ones who threaten to overrun our land. The man, playing the first prince, dropped to his knees, his voice trembling with emotion. Though I may be disgraced and ruined, God in the heavens knows my truth. My soul shall be recognized as virtuous. Raising his gaze to the heavens, he continued, Oh, my brother who has yet to be born, the fate of this land now lies in your hands. One day, the truth will come to light, that I never coveted your throne. I have pleaded my innocence, but the wicked ones have blinded your eyes and deafened your ears. You do not see the truth that stands before you. Tears streaked his face as he raised a knife. But I will not resent you. Father, if it is my death you desire. His words trailed off, heavy with despair. The audience sat frozen, captivated by the intensity of the performance. Eris watched silently, her expression unreadable. I thought Electo's brother was executed rather than taking his own life. But then again, it wouldn't be a play if they stuck entirely to the truth, she mused. Suddenly, a woman burst onto the stage, her hands outstretched toward the prince. No, my child. My precious son. She cried, her voice breaking. No matter what others say, I know you are innocent. Run away from here. Please, put down that knife and flee to safety. The actress, portraying the empress, fell to her knees, desperation etched into her voice. Even if we are never to meet again in this life, we will remain closer than if you choose to cross the river of the afterlife. As long as we share the same moonlit sky, we are together. The prince gripped the knife tightly, its blade now poised toward his chest. Stop, she pleaded, her cries filled with anguish. Do you wish to inflict the greatest pain a mother can bear? The prince's voice cracked as he replied, Mother, do not waste your tears on a pitiful son who could not even defend his innocence. Then, with a swift motion, he plunged the blade into himself. Gasps erupted from the crowd as the empress screamed, rushing toward him. Blood pooled around him as she wailed, cradling his body. My child. My precious baby. Her sorrow turned to fury as she cried. The second act opened with the prince standing before the emperor and Marquis Mazzillion. I cherished you more than anything in the world, and this is how you repay me. The emperor thundered, his voice filled with anger. You are like a venomous snake, waiting to strike at my neck. The prince's reply was earnest, his voice heavy with sorrow. I swear on my life, I have never had such thoughts. Who whispered this deceit into your ear, father? The emperor's eyes shifted to the Marquis, who stood smirking. You, murderer. You filthy liar. The prince roared, pointing at him. You're worse than a thief. The Marquis stepped forward, calm and composed. Your Majesty, here is the proof of their treachery, he announced, presenting a ledger. The Queen and the Prince have diverted funds to build a secret army. A witness has confirmed it. The Emperor's expression darkened as he scanned the report. How dare they? He hissed. The Prince struggled against the guards holding him back. Father, don't be deceived. This is all a scheme. He shouted. May God strike me with lightning if I am lying. As if on cue, lightning flashed across the sky, bathing the stage in an eerie light. The prince faltered, his face pale with fear. The emperor's voice boomed. Lock the prince in the tower. Not even a drop of water shall reach him. The guards dragged the prince away as he cried out, "Father." The stage dimmed once more, leaving the audience in stunned silence. And now for the queen, though she is with child. Confine her to her quarters until further notice, the emperor commanded, rubbing his temples in exhaustion. Yes, your majesty. As you wish, Marquis Mazzillion replied with a subtle smirk. In the third act, the scene shifted to a bustling marketplace. The prince and empress, cloaked in simple hoods, moved among the poor, handing out rations. "Have mercy on these souls," the empress murmured, her voice heavy with sorrow. "So many are starving and freezing in this cold. These rations may sustain them for now, but it is only a temporary reprieve." The prince glanced at the children huddled near the edge of the stage. "Mother, I worry most for the children. If they could receive proper education, they might escape this cycle of poverty. But their parents force them to beg in the streets." Seated in the audience, Eris studied Anakin, whose eyes remained fixed on the stage. "I wonder if he sees himself in their plight," she thought. Marquis Mazzillion appeared, bowing before the prince and empress. "Your Highness, your Majesty, we once planned to build an orphanage and school here as part of the poverty relief project, but it was cancelled due to insufficient funds," he explained, his voice steady. "There must be a way," the prince insisted. "Your Highness, why not donate funds from the royal treasury?" Mazzillion suggested with a practiced smile. "We could hire workers and begin construction immediately." The prince's face lit up. "Excellent. I'll issue a check once we return to the palace. Use whatever amount you deem necessary. We're only giving back what we've collected from the people," the empress added. "No amount is too much if it means helping them." "You are more attuned to the needs of the people than we are," the prince said, placing a hand on Mazzillion's shoulder. "We trust you completely. If there's anything else you need, don't hesitate to ask." Mazzillion bowed again, his smirk returning. "As you wish, your Highness." His thoughts betrayed his outward humility. "I'll need to bribe a poor magical engineer. Perhaps some thunder and lightning will do nicely." In the fourth act, Mazzillion convened with his allies in a dimly lit chamber. The prince is disciplined and virtuous, a staunch supporter of strengthening royal authority. "He may pose a threat in the future," Mazzillion began, his tone calculated. "While he is still a prince, we are safe. But once he ascends the throne, it will be our end." "So what do you propose?" one of his men asked. Mazzillion swirled his wine glass and spoke gently. "If we cannot sway him to our side, we must eliminate him." Gasps filled the room. "Assassination? That's treason," one protested. "Not outright," Mazzillion countered. "We must ensure the king expels his son of his own volition. The queen and the prince are passionate about aiding the poor. If we request more funds for relief efforts, they will comply without hesitation. Once we secure the funds, we'll hire soldiers and fabricate evidence of their supposed treason." The room fell silent before breaking into cheers. "Brilliant. The king is ruthless. He won't hesitate to eliminate a threat, even if it's his own son," Mazzillion added, raising his glass. "Let's rid ourselves of all their loyal servants while we're at it." Another shouted, laughter echoing through the chamber. In the fifth act, the scene softened as the emperor dined with his family. "What a beautiful day," the empress remarked. "Indeed," the emperor replied. "The first sunny day in weeks. Even the heavens seem to bless this moment." The empress set down her goblet, her expression serene. "It's such a fine day, I think it's the perfect time to share some good news." The emperor leaned forward. "What could make my bold queen hesitate? Speak freely." She placed a hand on her stomach. "The prince will soon have a sibling." The emperor's face lit with joy as he clasped her hands. "Oh, my love. To think you've kept such a wonderful secret from me. And those doctors dared to hide it from me as well." The empress smiled softly. "I wanted to tell you myself." The prince grinned. "Mother, that's wonderful news. Even the sun seems to shine brighter today, blessing our family. Let's continue to trust and support one another." The emperor raised his cup. "Yes, let us make an oath under the witness of this brilliant sun. A splendid day, indeed." As the play concluded, the lights faded gently. Eris turned to Anakin, her expression pensive. "Anakin, if the world you lived in were nothing but a grand play, how would you feel?" Her gaze turned somber as her words lingered in the air. "A play?" Anakin asked, his tone laced with mild confusion. Yes, Eris replied, her gaze fixed on the ground. Where everything is already decided, and you're just acting out your role. You might not even be the main character. You could be a supporting character, or nothing more than an extra. Then I suppose it is what it is, Anakin said calmly. That's it? Eris asked, her voice edged with disbelief. Doesn't it make you mad? I'm not sure, he admitted. But what I am sure of is that I'm living my life the best way I know how. And for me, that's enough. Even if you're not the lead. Even if you don't get the recognition or attention you deserve, just because you're only a supporting character. She pressed, her frustration evident. A knight isn't meant to be the center of attention, he replied simply. If I wanted that, I would have chosen a different path. Eris sighed, her exasperation shifting to resignation. You have no ambition or goals at all. You're no fun. Is that how I seem? Anakin asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I thought I was working hard in my own way. Maybe it doesn't stand out much because everyone around me is putting in the same effort. Eris hesitated before responding, her fingers fidgeting. I'm sorry. You're right. Everyone is trying to make the most of their lives. Her gaze softened. I shouldn't judge others for what they choose to pursue. Her thoughts turned inward. I'm doing everything I can to return to the world I came from. To others, that probably seems ridiculous. But, just as shadows grow darker the closer they are to the light, maybe our efforts become clearer when we're near the edge. She looked up at him. Not everyone needs to understand how hard I'm trying. It's enough if you, my master, see it. Don't you agree? Anakin's expression remained calm as he asked, Isn't that all that matters? Eris stared at him, momentarily lost for words. I need to respond, but once I do, there's no going back. Her heart tightened. And that terrifies me. Anakin, she thought, her mind in turmoil. The next morning, as the young girl served Eris her breakfast, she hesitated, her gaze lingering on Eris's face. You look a lot like that famous Lady Eris, the girl said, her voice uncertain. I get that a lot. I guess I'm lucky, Eris replied, her tone calm and measured. It was a compliment, of course, the girl added with a laugh. Eris offered a small smile and returned her attention to the newspaper in her hands. Flipping through its pages, her eyes caught the headline she had been anticipating. Lady Eris has gone missing. Is the magic train truly safe? She scanned the article with interest. Since long ago, horses were our only mode of transportation. However, the downside of horses is that, after some distance, they require brakes. With mixed assumptions regarding her whereabouts, will the magic train make it to its final destination and return safely? Eris smirked to herself, folding the paper. I bet the royal palace and the Marquis are in a frenzy now that their grand plans have gone awry. Serves them right. As she ate, her mind wandered. I should linger in this town for a while. Let them stew. She set her fork down. Anakin, she said, her voice breaking his quiet observation of her. Tell the innkeeper to prepare a boat. I want to look around the lake. Yes, master, he replied without hesitation. Shall I ask them to pack some food for the trip as well? That would be nice, she said with a nod. A short while later, they stood outside the inn, ready to leave. Anakin held a picnic basket in one hand, steady and dutiful. As Eris stepped forward, the young girl approached her again, a shy smile on her face. Excuse me, miss. The girl called, holding something small in her hands. Eris turned, intrigued, as the girl leaned closer. A delicate flower petal was gently placed in her hair. I wanted to give it to you because you're so beautiful, the girl said, giggling. Eris regarded her with a rare softness. How cute of you, she remarked, reaching into her pouch. She pressed a few coins into the girl's palm. Here. Don't let any adults take it from you. Thank you. The girl said, her tone calm yet bright. Let's go, Anakin, Eris said, stepping forward again. The two of them boarded the small boat. Anakin paddled quietly while Eris sat in thought, the stillness of the water mirroring her deliberations. I've mulled this over all night. Should I tell him or not? Her decision made, she broke the silence. Anakin, she began, her voice steady but tinged with something unspoken. He looked up, meeting her gaze. You're one of the characters from a novel I read, she said plainly. This world is a place I once read about. Anakin was silent, his eyes fixed on her, waiting for her to continue. You were a supporting character, Eris said softly, her gaze dropping to her reflection in the water. You stayed by Eris's side. And you loved her. Her fingers brushed against her cheek absently. She's breathtakingly beautiful. It scares me that I've grown so used to this face. What if it feels unfamiliar when I go back to my world? She took a steadying breath. I'm sorry, Anakin, she murmured. I'm sorry for taking away the woman you would have fallen in love with. His expression didn't shift, but his voice was steady when he finally spoke. How would you know I would have loved her? Because it was written in the book, she replied, her tone distant. I read it from start to finish. I know how this story ends. Anakin's paddling slowed, but he didn't stop. And what if I don't act the way it was written in your book? Eris's lips tightened. If something deviates, the principle of causality will correct it. This world has its rules. I won't die, even if you try to kill me, because it was never written that I would. Anakin tilted his head slightly, his gaze thoughtful. So that means I'll end up falling in love with you someday? Eris froze, her thoughts spinning. He's not supposed to fall in love with me, right? What? She stammered. Do you end up loving me as well? He pressed, his tone unshaken. Eris turned her face away sharply, breaking the tension between their gazes. No, she said firmly. I'm not going to love you, and you won't love me either. But her thoughts betrayed her. What if I do? How could I even think about that when I'm determined to leave this world? I'm being so irresponsible. Anakin, she said abruptly, pointing toward a cliff ahead. Take me there. His gaze followed her gesture. To that cliff? Yes. It looks dangerous. It's not, she said with a faint smile. The principle of causality will protect me. As the boat reached the shore, she climbed the steep incline to the top of the cliff. The vast expanse of water stretched below her. In a movie I watched once, the characters learned there were two ways to wake up from a dream, by dying or falling into water. She stepped to the edge, the wind pulling at her hair and clothes. It's higher than I thought, scarier, too. But if anything goes wrong, Anakin will save me. Without another thought, she leapt into the air. The sensation of falling gripped her stomach before she hit the water. The cold engulfed her instantly, the weightlessness pulling her down. The feeling of sinking, it's almost nice. Yes, just like this. I need to leave this place before I get more attached. Her lungs began to burn, water trickling into her nose. But before she could surrender to the pull of the lake, a hand grabbed her arm, yanking her upward with startling force. She surfaced, gasping and coughing, as strong hands dragged her onto the shore. Just what were you thinking? A voice roared, cutting through the haze in her mind. Eris blinked up at her rescuer, her breath catching in her throat. Jason, she whispered, her shock evident. What's Jason doing here? Eris thought, her brow furrowing as she glanced at him, drenched and clearly out of place. Can you let go? She said, shifting uncomfortably as his grip lingered on her arm. Jason released her but didn't move far, his expression unreadable. Before she could say more, Anakin appeared, stepping between them with a calm but firm presence. He draped his robe over her shoulders without a word before turning to Jason. How dare you carelessly put your hands on a lady? Anakin said, his tone cool and measured. Jason scoffed. And I'm surprised a knight who failed to protect his master still has anything to say. The tension between them crackled as they glared at each other, neither backing down. What are they doing right now? Eris thought, watching the silent standoff with thinly veiled displeasure. Back at the inn, Eris changed into fresh clothes, her mind still racing. I didn't expect to be caught so easily. Who'd have thought Jason would show up out of nowhere? She adjusted her tie and turned, only to find Jason leaning casually against the doorframe. Going somewhere, Lady Eris? He asked with a wry smile. Don't tell me you're planning to flee again. Are you surveilling me, Sir Kagar? She replied, narrowing her eyes. You have no idea the uproar you caused in the capital, he said, stepping into the room. They used your image to promote the magic train, and then you vanished. You may not have acceded to the throne yet, but after your coming-of-age ceremony, you're practically considered part of the imperial family. Eris looked away, avoiding his gaze. I didn't think Jason would care so much about finding me, she thought. I'm just going to stop by the souvenir shop before coming back. I'll be right back, so wait here, she said, brushing past him. I'll come with you, Jason replied easily. Your knight is still packing. Besides, I know a shop that carries fine gemstones. I'll lead the way. Do as you please, she said with a sigh, unwilling to argue. Jason led her to a quaint jewelry shop, its sign proudly proclaiming, "Welcome to Rolling Stones. Purveyors of Vivian's tears." "Ah, madam. Welcome." The shopkeeper greeted them cheerfully. "Are you looking for a gift?" "Madam?" Eris asked, puzzled. "Isn't the gentleman next to you your husband?" Eris flinched slightly before snapping, "Husband? As if." Jason chuckled softly at her reaction, his usual calm demeanor unshaken. "We're nothing like that," she said coldly. "I'm here to buy gifts for my servants. Show me what you have." "My apologies. I'll bring out some options right away," the shopkeeper stammered, bowing and hurrying off. "You didn't hesitate to correct him," Jason said, feigning a wounded look. "You hurt my feelings, Lady Eris." "Your feelings are none of my concern," she replied curtly, running her fingers over the display of coins. "By the way, how did you find me here, Sir Kagar? Did you think the Emperor and the Marquis would sit idly after your disappearance?" "Honestly, they reacted slower than I expected," Jason said with a sly grin. "But I volunteered to search for you. I wanted to find you myself." Eris raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Why aren't you visiting your parents while you're here?" she asked instead. "Shouldn't you greet them? I hear House Kagar hosts parties nearly every day." "I'd rather not linger around them for long," Jason replied smoothly. "Funny," Eris said with a faint smirk. "I could say the same about you." Jason leaned in slightly. "Does that mean you'd enjoy spending time with me doing something other than chatting?" Eris glared at him, her patience thinning. Without a word, she stomped on his foot, earning a quiet wince. "You're quite temperamental," he said lightly, his composure intact. "What did you expect after a comment like that?" She shot back. "I'm concerned about you," Jason said, his tone more earnest. "Don't be," Eris retorted, turning away. "You keep doing things that make it impossible not to be," he said, his voice soft but firm. "So you're saying it's my fault?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Jason said simply. "Now tell me, Lady Eris, what should I do to stop worrying about you?" Eris was momentarily silent before replying, "Why are you asking me? I've never even worried about myself." Jason didn't respond, his gaze lingering on her as if searching for something unspoken. "Thank you for waiting," the jeweler called out, breaking the moment as he returned with a tray. "This gemstone is called Vivian's Tear. It's a rare, precious stone from the lake nearby, unique to this town." Eris examined the gems briefly. "I'll take 5. Put them on necklaces." "Right away, madam," the jeweler said, bowing enthusiastically. Jason glanced at her, his smile faint. Jason silently observed Eris for a moment as she clutched the bag handed to her by the jeweler before picking up a gemstone from the display, inspecting it closely. "Is that for Lady Helena?" Eris asked, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "Yes," Jason replied. "I want to have it customized for her." Eris gave a small, dismissive wave. "Don't waste your time. Just get one that's already made. If it doesn't turn out well, you'll only put the recipient in an awkward position." Jason's expression softened. "I want her to have something I've touched with my own hands." Eris resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "Sick weirdo. He's worse than Hubris. How is it possible that not a single one of them is normal? Poor Helena, I actually feel sorry for her." She turned her head in dissatisfaction, her gaze falling on a particular gemstone in the display case. The stone's muted color stood out to her. "The color is so different from the others," she thought, picking it up carefully. "Oh, that one isn't very popular," the jeweler said. "The color is dull, and it's prone to scratches. It doesn't sell well." Eris studied the stone. "Dull and prone to scratches. It kind of resembles me," she mused, her expression unreadable. "Sir, please make this into a necklace as well. I want it in this style," she said, pointing to a design. The jeweler hesitated. "Are you sure? It might not be comfortable to wear." "It doesn't matter," Eris said coolly. "I'm not the one who's going to wear it." When they returned to the inn, Anakin was waiting outside, his stance formal and alert. "You're back," he said, stepping forward. "Thieves have been spotted camping in the forest after learning you're in this village. I think it'd be safest if I drove the carriage on our way back." Eris stopped in front of him, her expression unreadable but her tone commanding. "Anakin, kneel down." Anakin knelt without hesitation. Eris revealed the necklace she had commissioned, its dull gemstone catching the light subtly. She leaned forward and carefully placed it around his neck. "There," she said simply. Anakin's hand brushed against the pendant. Is it uncomfortable? She asked, watching his reaction. Yes, he admitted without hesitation. A faint smile crossed her lips. I'm glad you're honest. I made it that way on purpose. Anakin's face remained stoic, but Eris watched him, her expression softening. From now on, he'll think of me every time that necklace bothers him. The thought gave her a fleeting sense of satisfaction before she caught herself. Wait, no. Why am I starting to think like Jason? She turned away abruptly, brushing her hair over her shoulder. Let's get going, she declared, her voice brisk. Jason stood nearby, arms folded, his gaze quietly lingering on the exchange. Anakin took the reins and drove the carriage through the forest, the dense foliage casting dappled shadows over the trail. Inside, Eris sat across from Jason, her posture straight and composed. Do you know what happens to a noble lady and her knight if they elope? Jason asked, breaking the silence. His tone was calm, but his words carried weight. If the Marquis and the imperial family find out, your knight's head will be chopped off for seducing you, and you'll spend the rest of your life locked up in the imperial palace. Eris tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. An elopement? I didn't know you were such a romantic, Sir Kagar. Didn't you see me jump off a cliff? I came to Randall to die. Her tone was sharp, with no hint of jest. Jason leaned back, unconvinced. Lies. Be honest, Lady Eris. I know how it feels. Love tends to cloud one's judgment. If that's what you want to believe, fine by me, she replied, her tone dismissive. Jason's brows furrowed. But why? Was that truly your purpose for running away? Do I need a reason? She countered, her voice calm but firm. Jason pressed on. Is it because you feel there's something missing in your life? What more could you possibly want? There's nothing I want here. That's why I decided to die. I wouldn't have any regrets even if I dropped dead right now, she said, her gaze steady. Jason studied her intently but remained silent. He'll never understand. Jason, the dragon slayer, still clings to life despite his burdens. Unlike you, Sir Kagar, she continued, I don't desire anything, not survival, not companionship, not even love. So you can save your pity and your lectures. Jason cut her off, his voice low and firm. What makes you think you know what I'm thinking or feeling? If you truly understood, you wouldn't say such things. Eris's eyes narrowed. Let's stop this conversation. As you said, I'm practically a member of the imperial family now. Choose your words wisely, sir. The carriage suddenly jolted to a halt. What's going on? Eris asked, frowning. A voice shouted from outside. Is it this carriage? Yes, I'm positive. Another responded as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Hand over Lady Eris. We know she's in there. Jason's expression hardened. He stepped out of the carriage, standing tall against the bandits who had blocked their path. If you leave now, I'll let you live, he announced, his voice cold and unwavering. The leader of the bandits laughed. You must be delusional. Run away now if you value your life. Jason's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. Don't say I didn't warn you. Inside the carriage, Eris glanced at him through the window. We knew the thieves would be here, but it seems worse than expected, she thought. Jason's voice cut through the tension. Lady Eris, take the horse and leave with your knight immediately. What? What about you? She demanded, stepping out of the carriage. Jason gave her a confident smile. We could travel together if these were the only thieves, but I doubt that's the case. I'll handle this. Don't worry, you can scold me all you like once we're back in the capital. Sir Kagar. Eris shouted, her voice tense, but Anakin rode up beside her, his hand outstretched. Master, take my hand, he said firmly. Wait, she started, but he hoisted her onto the horse with ease. Relax and lean against my chest. It'll be more comfortable that way, he told her. Flustered, she muttered, all right, glancing back at Jason one last time as Anakin spurred the horse forward. They galloped away, leaving Jason behind to face the bandits alone. They rode steadily until the evening sky turned a dusky orange. How much longer until we reach the capital? Eris asked, her voice tinged with fatigue. It'll take another 2 days, Anakin replied, glancing back briefly. Eris sighed. I don't think my bottom will survive until then, she muttered, her tone laced with resignation. Should I stop by a village to buy a cushion? He offered, his tone polite and matter-of-fact. No, I'll manage, she replied with a faint shake of her head. Anakin considered her for a moment. Then, should I tell you a story? It might take your mind off the discomfort. You? A story? Eris asked, raising an eyebrow. The idea seemed almost absurd to her. If you're not interested, he began, but she interrupted. No, tell me. What kind of story? Is it about you? She asked, her curiosity piqued. My story is dull. I had a mundane life, he admitted without hesitation. Not all lives have to be dramatic, she replied, her tone softening. If I must tell a story about myself, I'd rather talk about the present. I don't like dwelling on the past, Anakin said, his voice steady. Eris observed him in silence. If I become part of his past, will he move forward as if I never existed? Maybe I'm not as significant to him as he is to me. He's loyal because I'm his master, nothing more. Anakin continued, so don't command me to look back, and don't ask me about the future. I'm not good at juggling multiple things. I focus on one task at a time. Eris leaned slightly closer, her gaze softening as she rested her head lightly against his back. So, what are you focusing on now? At the moment, I'm focused on getting you back to the capital safely, he replied without hesitation. I really like him. No matter how selfish I act, he stays by my side without resentment. He's always there for me. Eris let the thought linger as a bittersweet smile touched her lips. Even after I return to my world, I know I'll remember him for a long time. I just hope he remembers me too. By the time they reached the capital, the familiar sights of the Mazzillion estate loomed large. The manor came into view, and the tension in Eris's chest eased slightly. Lady Eris, where have you been? How could you disappear like that? You have no idea how worried we were, Emma exclaimed in horror as the maids swarmed around her like a protective flock. I brought presents for you all, so calm down, Eris replied, her tone calm but tinged with weariness. From the staircase, her father's stern voice cut through the commotion. Eris, come see me in my study. Don't disturb us until further notice. His gaze was as cold as his tone. Eris met his eyes briefly, her expression unreadable, before she nodded and followed him to the study. Once inside, her father stood by the window, his back to her. The room was silent except for the distant sound of rustling leaves. Did you want to talk to me? She asked, her voice steady. What were you thinking, acting out like that? He said, his tone cold and measured, his gaze fixed outside. Don't think you can fool me, the Marquis said, his voice filled with anger as he turned to face her. I'm afraid I have no idea what you're talking about, Eris replied calmly. Do you really not know why I told you to appoint a knight? He demanded. It's so that he can do the dirty work in your stead. You're not making sense right now, Eris said, her voice steady. I'm the one who chose Anakin as my knight, not you. What did you say? He snapped, his expression darkening. Eris met his gaze evenly. Let's use this chance to set the record straight. He's the one who started this. On that day we had dinner together, she thought, her mind clear. You heard me. And you're also well aware that I'm not your daughter, she added coldly, folding her arms across her chest. You already know, so there's no need for me to play along anymore. How dare you? The Marquis clenched his fists in anger, his face reddening. Eris barely reacted. Let me just say, if you're thinking about threatening me with my life, don't bother. There's nothing I want more than to die. Her tone was casual, almost detached. I see that a rude and vulgar being has taken over my daughter's body, he said harshly, his voice dripping with disdain. Eris stifled a laugh. Did you just laugh? The Marquis stared at her in shock. Yes, she replied bluntly. Because you're hilarious. Don't act so upset, you never loved your daughter anyway. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was silence between them. Eris reflected, if he had really loved her, he wouldn't have spoiled her like that. The Marquis gave Eris whatever she wanted, but more accurately, he made her want things that worked in his favor. You should have called off her engagement if you really loved her, she continued, her tone biting. But you were greedy for power, so you turned a blind eye to her suffering. You were so quick to realize your daughter had become someone else. Did you not see the pain she was going through because of the prince? Shut your mouth. The Marquis exploded. I loved her. I wanted nothing but the best for her, to see her sit on the throne. Eris stepped closer, her voice firm. Being above others doesn't necessarily equate to happiness. Take a look at the great people around you, the imperial family. Do they seem happy to you? She let the words linger, sure that he had no response. After all, he was the one behind the defamation plot against the empress and the prince. What are you planning? He asked, his gaze growing more serious. If I tell you, will you help me? She asked, her tone skeptical. I might, depending on what it is, he replied, his voice betraying some curiosity. Forget it, Eris said dismissively. I have a better helper than you. She thought for a moment, there's no way the Marquis will help me if I tell him I'm planning to die. I'm sure he's troubled because he doesn't know anything about me. He can't intimidate or appease me. I'm a threat to him because I know his secret, but I'm also someone who would be a waste to get rid of. The Marquis glared at her, but before he could speak, there was a knock on the door. Who is it? He shouted, his frustration evident. Didn't I say not to disturb us? My lord, a servant from the imperial palace is here, a maid called out from the other side of the door. I'm here on behalf of the empress, the messenger added. I'll show myself in. Eris raised an eyebrow, surprised. The empress? The butler entered, bowing respectfully. Lady Eris, Her Majesty has summoned you to the palace. She would like to discuss something with you. Right now? Eris asked, surprised. Yes, there's a carriage waiting outside, he replied. Well, I can't keep Her Majesty waiting, she said, nodding toward her father. I'll be on my way. All right, he replied curtly, his eyes still burning with anger. Eris smirked inwardly. He can glare at me all he wants, but I'm the one in charge here. With that thought, she followed the butler out of the room. In the imperial palace, Eris sat gracefully in the empress's parlor, a steaming cup of tea placed before her. She glanced at the dark liquid, her expression composed but pensive. This tea is unusually dark. Could it be poisoned? She wondered briefly. Are you afraid it's poisoned? The empress asked with a faint smirk, her voice laced with condescension. Of course not, Eris replied with a soft smile. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit this, but I can't handle hot drinks very well. I was simply waiting for it to cool down. She's not foolish enough to poison me outright, Eris thought, carefully lifting the cup but keeping her hands steady. The empress's smirk deepened. I thought you might lock yourself in your room, throwing one of your famous fits. That's the kind of girl you are, isn't it? You crave the spotlight and throw tantrums when it shifts away. Eris set the teacup down with deliberate precision, her smile unwavering. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I may be slow to grasp subtleties, so could you be more direct? What exactly are you trying to say? The empress's eyes glinted. You were quite sharp at your coming-of-age ceremony. You figured out that it was me who gave Helena your dress, didn't you? Eris met her gaze steadily. I didn't expect her to admit it so boldly. I assumed as much. The palace stylist always has a spare dress for emergencies. It would have been impossible for Lady Helena to acquire it without assistance from someone as powerful as Your Majesty. Am I correct? The Empress let out a slow clap, her smile widening. You're sharper than I gave you credit for. Yes, I ordered the stylist to hand over the dress. Then I had Helena wear it, discarding the one Sir Kagar sent for you. Why? Eris asked evenly. I don't like you, Eris Miserian, the Empress said coldly. You're reckless, spiteful, and unfit to become the crown princess. If you married into the imperial family, House Mazian would become far too powerful. That's something I cannot allow. So you chose Lady Helena, a commoner and former maid? Eris pressed. Precisely. She has no connections, no family to scheme on her behalf. She's kind-hearted, obedient, and beautiful enough to secure the crown prince's favor. An heir is all that's required of her, and the rest can be taught. Eris's thoughts churned. She sees Helena as a pawn, not a person. No one in this palace treats her like a human being. The Empress leaned back, placing her teacup on its saucer. Let's be honest, Lady Eris. I humiliated you, and I'm sure you hate me for it. But I don't care. I hate you far more than you could ever hate me. I want you dead. A painful, agonizing death. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Your father killed my son, my innocent boy. And though you didn't wield the blade, you are his most prized possession. That's why I want to destroy you. Eris studied the trembling fury in the Empress's expression. I wonder if she screamed like this when she lost her son. Is this the depth of her grief? The Empress's voice cracked as she continued. Every night, I lie awake in torment, reliving my loss. I'm already in hell, so killing you would be nothing more than sinking a little deeper. If I wanted to truly torture you, I could drag you into this palace as the crown princess and make your life unbearable. But I can't stand watching the two men who killed my son push to make you part of this family." Eris met her venom with calm indifference. "Your Majesty, I don't want to marry the crown prince." The empress froze, her disbelief evident. "You don't?" "No," Eris said firmly. "There was a time I thought love was worth sacrificing everything for, but that time has passed. Love is fleeting and fragile. I'd like to sever this engagement, with your blessing." "And what does the Marquis think of this decision?" the empress asked, regaining her composure. "That's irrelevant," Eris replied, her tone sharp. "She doesn't care about my feelings or Helena's, but she's concerned about my father's response." Typical. Eris set her teacup down, her smile returning. "What matters is that your Majesty understands my resolve." Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you enjoyed what you watched, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. Your comments mean the world to us and help us improve. The next episode promises even more excitement and unexpected twists, so stay tuned as we embark on this thrilling journey together. Keep the anticipation alive, and we'll catch you in the next episode.